out of nowhere. My son snapped. "Why are you always keeping tabs on me? Why do you constantly need to know exactly where I am?" I had merely asked what time he'd be home for dinner. I stood dead center in my own kitchen, clutching a damp dish towel, processing his words with total calm. Derek, 34 years old, stood there red-faced and scowling, striking the defensive posture of someone backed into a corner. It was Derek and his wife, Brooke, who had insisted on installing a family tracking app on our phones over a year ago. Their initial argument was noble enough they claimed it was for my safety, just in case something happened to me living alone as a widow. However, that concern quickly morphed into the perfect excuse for them to move into my spacious, four-bedroom house under the guise of saving up money together. "I was just wondering if I should heat up the pot roast now or put it in the fridge," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly level, not raising it a single decibel. "It's constant. Mom, you always need to know my exact schedule, where I am, who I'm talking to. It's suffocating." "I'm not a toddler you need to supervise," he shot back, crossing his arms firmly. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Brooke peeking out from the hallway. She didn't say a word, but the slight tension in her shoulders and her expectant gaze told me everything I needed to know. I knew perfectly well this wasn't a spontaneous tantrum. Derek rarely initiated conflict on his own. It was glaringly obvious they'd been rehearsing this argument behind my back, and he was just reading from a script. I wasn't about to beg for their affection or justify my actions in my own home. If they wanted distance, they were going to get exactly that. I turned off the stove, meticulously folded the dish towel, and set it on the marble counter. "Maybe you're right. Derek, you need your space," I murmured. That very night, while the low hum of the living room television drifted down the hall, I sat on my bed and pulled out my phone. I opened that app that supposedly kept us close, and with a single tap, I permanently disabled my location sharing. There was no arguing, no door slamming. I simply turned off the light. Over the next few days, I decided to put their supposed need for space to the ultimate test. I completely stopped asking questions and shifted my routines so I wouldn't cross their paths. If Derek rushed out the door in the morning, I didn't wish him a good day or ask when he'd be back. If Brooke got home late from the office, she no longer found a hot plate of dinner waiting for her under a microwave cover. Overnight, I transformed into an extremely polite, yet entirely distant roommate. To my surprise, or perhaps not, they both seemed genuinely relieved by the new arrangement. Brooke, in particular, started walking around the house with a new sense of ownership. She'd invite her friends over for coffee without giving me a heads up, assuming I would just stay holed up in my bedroom reading or go out to run errands. A truly healthy household doesn't celebrate emotional disconnection with such enthusiasm. I started noticing little things I would have glossed over before. Derek was spending a lot of time glued to his phone, speaking in nervous whispers as he paced the backyard. Brooke, meanwhile, spent hours measuring the downstairs sunroom. It was a beautiful, light-filled room I used for my sewing machines and my indoor plants. "Are you thinking of painting the walls in here?" I asked one afternoon, catching her on the floor with a tape measure, jotting down numbers in a small notebook. She jumped a little, clearly startled by my sudden appearance. "Oh, no, Diane. I was just mentally arranging some boxes. We just have so much clutter," she mumbled, avoiding direct eye contact. I didn't press the issue. It wasn't worth launching an interrogation based on a gut feeling. Still, my intuition sharpened by decades of life experience told me something was being orchestrated right under my roof. My son's accusation about feeling controlled wasn't the real issue. It was a smokescreen. That night, while scrolling through my bank statements on my iPad, I noticed the backup credit card I'd given Derek for medical emergencies had several pending charges totaling over $1,200 at West Elm. I quietly closed the screen. I wasn't going to cry about it. I was going to act. Thursday morning brought an interesting shift in the routine. Derek strolled into the kitchen while I was pouring my morning coffee. He poured himself a glass of tap water and leaned against the fridge, striking an oddly relaxed, overly rehearsed pose. "Mom, Brooke and I are heading up to Tahoe this weekend. Just a quick trip to unplug from work," he announced, rubbing the back of his neck. I nodded calmly, taking a slow sip from my mug. "That sounds lovely. Have a great time." He just stood there, waiting for more. Maybe he expected a barrage of questions about where they were staying, who was watering their plants, or if they had snow chains in the trunk. When he got absolutely none of that, he cleared his throat awkwardly. "We're leaving first thing tomorrow and coming back Sunday night. You'll be okay here alone, right?" "I'll be perfectly fine," I assured him, not even glancing his way. The second I heard his car pull out of the driveway and head down the street, I picked up my phone and called my oldest friend, Helen. She's always been an incredibly practical woman, and we'd been talking about taking a trip out to the coast for the better part of 6 months. "Do you still want to head out to Monterey this weekend?" I asked, skipping the pleasantries entirely. "My bags have been half-packed since April." "Diane?" She laughed on the other end of the line. We agreed to hit the road Friday before dawn, hours before my son and daughter-in-law would even wake up for their supposed mountain getaway. I didn't plan on leaving a sticky note on the fridge or sending a courtesy text. If my supervision was so suffocating, my total absence should be the ultimate gift. I spent the afternoon getting my things together. I tucked my important documents and spare keys into the bottom of my tote bag. And then, right from my banking app, I temporarily froze Derek's emergency credit card. While Brooke was humming happily in the hallway packing her bags that night, I made sure my car had a full tank of gas. I pulled out of my driveway at 5:30 a.m. on Friday. The air was crisp, and the neighborhood streets were dead quiet. I swung by Helen's condo to pick her up, and we hit the highway toward Monterey with the radio playing softly in the background. It felt profoundly liberating. It had been months since I'd driven somewhere without worrying about exactly what time I needed to be back to check the oven, or feeling Brooke's eyes quietly judging how I ran my own house. We pulled up to our modest but gorgeous beachfront hotel right around noon. We walked the boardwalk, grabbed some fresh halibut at a little local joint, and talked about books, our younger days, and everything under the sun except my family. Helen sensed something was up, but she respected my silence. She only gave me her undivided attention when I finally decided to give her the short version of the shouting match in the kitchen. "You did the right thing," Helen declared, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. "You don't beg grown adults for respect. You step back and let them shoulder the full weight of the independence they claim to want so badly." I went the entire day without checking my cell phone. I left it buried at the bottom of my canvas tote, switched entirely to silent. I didn't feel a single ounce of guilt. Instead, I felt a strange, comforting lightness. I had gotten so used to twisting my days to fit their schedules that I'd almost forgotten how simple it was to just be responsible for myself. It wasn't until 9 p.m., back in the comfort of our hotel room, that I finally pulled the phone out. The screen instantly lit up, flooded with a cascade of urgent notifications. I counted 18 missed calls from Derek and 12 from Brooke. On top of that, there was a rapid-fire string of texts that went from initial surprise to outright demands. "Mom, where did you go? The house is completely dark. I can't track you on the app. Are you okay? Mom, pick up. This isn't funny." I dropped the phone on the bed and walked into the bathroom. Their supposed romantic getaway to Tahoe didn't really line up with the fact that they were physically standing in my house checking on my whereabouts on a Friday night. While I was drying my hands, I heard the phone vibrating aggressively against the wooden nightstand. It was Derek again. Helen, who was flipping through a magazine on the other bed, raised a questioning eyebrow. "You going to answer them?" "Not yet," I murmured calmly. I picked up the phone and read the long, panicked paragraph my son had just fired off. "Mom, seriously, please answer. I was trying to pay the delivery guy for a $250 grocery haul, and your card got declined at the door. On top of that, I went down to the garage and your car is gone. Where exactly are you?" I smiled, feeling a mix of sheer exhaustion and crystal clarity. That was the real root of his panic. He wasn't terrified that I was lying in a hospital ditch somewhere. He was terrified because his free support system had evaporated without warning. The declined credit card and the missing car were the true triggers of this family drama. I typed out an incredibly brief, no-nonsense reply. "I'm doing great, enjoying some space. We'll talk Sunday." 5 seconds after I hit send, the screen lit up with an incoming call from him. I swiped the red button to decline it. Immediately, Brooke called. I declined that one, too. Finally, a voice memo popped up from my son. I played it on speakerphone so Helen could hear it too. He sounded breathless and genuinely annoyed. "Mom, this is so incredibly immature. We were supposed to go to Tahoe, but we had to cancel everything because your car was missing and we thought something terrible happened to you. Unfreeze the card and tell me where you are right now." It was all lies. If they were actually planning a road trip to the mountains, they would have taken their own SUV, not my sedan. And dropping hundreds of dollars on a massive grocery delivery on a Friday night made zero logical sense if they were planning to spend the entire weekend out of town. I locked my phone screen without replying. Poor kid. Helen chuckled, adjusting her reading glasses. He just realized his personal ATM has a mind of its own. Saturday morning, as we sat eating avocado toast overlooking the ocean, I decided to open the security camera app for my house. Ironically, Derek was the one who had given me admin access months ago, so I could check who was ringing the doorbell when I was home alone. I tapped on the live feed for the backyard. What popped up on the screen made me slowly set my coffee mug back down on its saucer. An unmarked U-Haul van was backed right up to my rear garden gate. 2 movers were lugging heavy cardboard boxes and a queen-sized mattress straight toward the sliding glass doors of my sunroom. Standing there directing traffic with a clipboard was Chase Brooks' 28-year-old younger brother, a guy who was perpetually finding himself and had never managed to hold down a lease for more than 6 months. "Take a look at this." "Helen," I said, sliding the phone across the table. She squinted at the screen and let out an indignant scoff. "They're moving your brother-in-law into your house. Right into your sewing room." Suddenly, all the puzzle pieces snapped into place. Derek's sudden outburst about me being controlling, the abrupt demand for privacy, the fake, illogical trip to Tahoe. They desperately needed me to stop asking questions. They needed me out of the house for the weekend so they could move Chase in without me there to put a stop to it. They figured that once his furniture was inside and he was already sleeping there, I'd be too embarrassed or polite to kick him out. They were banking on my hatred of conflict to keep me quiet. I closed the app with a hard swipe. I felt a deep, hollow disappointment in the man my son had become, but I wasn't going to let it paralyze me. Sadness doesn't fix problems. Action does. "Finish your breakfast." "Helen," I said, my voice steady as I flagged down the waiter for the check. "We're heading back today. I have some boundaries to redraw on my property." The drive back felt much shorter than the drive out. My mind was operating with mathematical precision. I wasn't going to make a dramatic scene. and I wasn't going to cry and beg for respect. Respect, when it's lost this entirely, isn't something you plead for. It's something you enforce through tangible actions. We pulled up to my neighborhood early Saturday afternoon. I parked a street over to make sure they wouldn't hear my engine in the driveway. Helen stayed in the car, ready to step in only if I felt overwhelmed. But I knew I could handle this entirely on my own. I let myself in through the side door with my key. The air smelled like packing tape and the distinct sweat of moving day. I could hear relaxed laughter echoing from downstairs. I walked silently down the hall that led to my sunroom. All three of them were in there. Brooke was busy hanging flannel shirts in the wooden armoire I used for my fabrics, while Derek and Chase were finishing bolting the legs onto a bed frame right in the middle of my room. "Think it's centered?" Chase asked. "Yeah, perfect," my son replied, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Mom won't even notice this until Sunday night. By then, you'll be completely unpacked, and she won't have a choice but to accept it. You know she hates arguing." I took a step forward and leaned casually against the doorframe. "Sunday night actually didn't work for me, to be honest," I said, keeping my tone perfectly conversational. The three of them froze in place. Brooke dropped a plastic hanger, and it hit the hardwood floor with a sharp clack. Derek visibly paled, spinning around on his heels. "Mom, what? What are you doing here?" "I thought you went out of town. I needed to take some space." "Derek, exactly like you screamed at me to do the other day," I replied, scanning the room. I noticed my bins of sewing thread shoved carelessly into a corner, but it looks like you guys needed my space a whole lot more than I did. Chase looked mortified and glued his eyes to the floor. Brooke took a step forward, forcing a tight, placating smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Diane, we were going to sit you down and tell you all about this. It's just a temporary favor." "Temporary or permanent? I set the rules in my house," I said, cutting off her rehearsed speech without raising my voice. I locked eyes with my son. "You threw a tantrum in my kitchen, called me controlling, and lied to my face about a trip to Tahoe, just so you could sneak a tenant in behind my back." "Mom." "Chase needed some help," Derek stammered. "That is not my problem," I interrupted. "You have 40 minutes to take this bed apart, empty my closet, and load that U-Haul back up." Brooke opened her mouth to protest, but I simply turned on my heel and walked into the kitchen to pour myself a glass of water. There was no further debate. In under 50 minutes, Chase drove off in silence. When my son and daughter-in-law trudged back into the living room, I walked over to the utility closet, grabbed a brand new deadbolt, and used a power drill to install it on my sunroom door while they watched in stunned silence. I slipped the only key into my pocket. Finally, I dropped a stack of mail and bills on the kitchen island. "The emergency card is permanently canceled. Starting today, you are responsible for exactly half of the water, gas, and electric bills, and your groceries are 100% your own responsibility." The new dynamic hit Derek and Brooke like a freight train. Without my hot meals waiting for them, without free access to my car, and without my money quietly subsidizing their lives, adulthood suddenly felt very heavy. Brooke tried to punish me with the silent treatment, aggressively slamming kitchen cabinets. I completely ignored her. I just went about my routine watering my plants and reading peacefully behind my locked sunroom door. One evening, Derek cornered me in the hallway, holding a fistful of receipts and looking utterly exhausted. "Mom, our expenses this month are insane. We can't pay half of a $400 electric bill, buy our own food, and save for our own house. You're suffocating us financially." I smiled internally at his choice of words. "Derek, space and privacy cost money. You wanted freedom, and now I don't ask what time you're coming home. You are free. But this is how independence works when you share a roof. Are you telling us to move out? He asked, his jaw tight. I'm telling you to step up and handle your responsibilities, I replied. If paying your own way doesn't fit into your financial plan, you are completely free to find an apartment that does. That night, I heard them arguing bitterly through the walls. I brewed myself a cup of chamomile tea and slept like a baby. 3 months later, my house was quiet again. It was a warm, spacious, healing kind of silence. Derek and Brooke simply couldn't sustain their lifestyle without my invisible financial padding, and they ended up renting a modest apartment on the other side of town. As he was loading the very last box into the trunk of his car, Derek looked back at me from the driveway. Are you happy about this, Mom? He asked, perhaps hoping to find a flicker of guilt on my face. I am at peace, Derek, I told him, meaning every word. And I genuinely hope you guys find peace in your new space, too. There was no screaming, no drama, no lawyers. I took back control of my life and every square inch of my property through simple, everyday actions. My sunroom was filled with afternoon light again, and I didn't have to sacrifice my dignity to get it back. Yesterday, Derek texted me to see if I wanted to grab lunch on Sunday. I said yes, but I made it clear we would meet at a restaurant downtown and split the check. He agreed without a single complaint. And naturally, that family tracking app has been deleted from my phone. If someone needs to know where I am, they can call me, ask politely, and I will decide if I feel like picking up. Sometimes. The greatest act of self-love isn't winning a screaming match, it's simply refusing to participate in one. We are often taught that mothers are supposed to be the constant shock absorbers for their family's problems, even when our efforts and our personal space are totally taken for granted. But this experience taught me something crucial. Real boundaries aren't established with tears, yelling, or long-winded justifications. They are built with quiet, precise actions. Withdrawing your time, your money, and your energy from a situation where you aren't respected isn't an act of revenge or selfishness. It's just pure common sense. Hearing someone demand space and deciding to give it to them, completely forcing them to shoulder the actual weight of adulthood, is profoundly liberating. At the end of the day, peace of mind is non-negotiable. You don't beg for respect. You establish it by remembering that your peace and your dignity matter just as much as anyone else's.